How on earth is it already going to be 2025? Well, this year just absolutely flew by. And I thought now would be a great time to sit down. You can clearly see we're in a different scenario than the typical garage setting with the kayaks, which we will make our way out there at some point during this video, I'm pretty sure. But it's a rainy, cold day. New Year is upon us. And I thought this would be a great opportunity to go over some baits and some catches that I thought kind of summed up 2025. So think of this as kind of like a recap video talking about what baits I thought worked really well for me. I'm going to pick stuff that like might be a little obvious. There's going to be a lot in there that are sleeper picks, stuff that I just started using this year and I thought made a big impact on my fishing season. And then we're going to look at some catches throughout the season. Some of these you might not have seen because I'm digging deep into the vault from this year. I didn't post all of them on YouTube. You may have seen some on social and stuff like that, but we had a really crazy season. We traveled close to 20,000 miles. I did the math. It was insane. I started the year at like 50,000 on my truck and ended at like 70. So a lot of driving this year for fishing. We went to a lot of cool places. Let's just dive into some baits that I thought made a really big impact. And I'm going to start by season. So I've got this little box here full of stuff, and my season started in February of this year. I did catch fish in January, but I would say like the actual season, because we did have a harder winter this year, it just wasn't fishable, like we were below freezing. And you guys know that if there's one bait I like to throw when it's cold, it's the jerkbait. And I want to really highlight this one. This is the Vision 110 Junior. I just did a video on this, so I won't spend a ton of time on it. This bait right here is what I caught my PB smallmouth on back in February. This one right here. This color, this bait, everything. This is the literal bait. This is Northern Secret. It's translucent. It's got purple. It's kind of got that like darker purple head. And then it's got the chartreuse belly on the bottom. You can see, but it's also kind of white. So it's got a lot of things going on there. And I swap all my hooks out on these. You can see I've got probably 30 different Vision 110s right here. But it's something about the +1 Junior that is just the nuts this time of year. I also use the Junior Normal quite a bit as well. So let's watch that clip back and kind of give you guys like a play-by-play on what happened.
So yeah, this is a wintering hole too. And he hit it when I was bumping rocks.
Got him. Oh, oh, oh my God. This is the biggest smallmouth I've ever hooked out here.
You gonna get it on that
side? Dude. Dude.
Show him.
Look at that.
Oh my Lord, that's a chunk.
Look at that, guys. That's a PB Missouri smallmouth.
This thing's a tank, bro.
4 pounds, 20 inches. He was right under that log. So yeah, you can see that jerkbaits were a big part of my season to start the year from February into March. We didn't really get into the main meat of the season until we got around to March, and that's when the tournaments kicked off. And the first tournament I fished this year was the Bassmaster Kayak Championship on Lake Tenkiller. I didn't post any of that footage. None of it. I actually was sitting in 15th out of 170 after day 1 of that. I was feeling pretty good. On day 2, we started off with a motor problem, which was great, and didn't get to my spot as quick as I would have liked to, but we did get there before lines end, which is fine. We also had GoPro problems, so a lot of that footage kind of got lost into the void, unfortunately. We did finish pretty strong in that. We got a top 25 finish, which for fishing against, quote, the best kayak anglers there are, presumably, based on qualification throughout the season, I was pretty happy with that finish. So let's talk about that one. Now, I was using a bait that might surprise you guys, considering that we were fishing Oklahoma in late March. In my mind, they were still kind of in that winter pattern. Those fish really hadn't pushed back into the coves, but this right here, the Megabass Okashira screwhead with a little spark shad, this bad boy absolutely wrecked them. I caught so many fish on this behind docks, pitching it over docks, pitching it over wires, and just letting it slowly cruise through those tiny, tiny bait balls. It was a pattern. I was fishing around 30 other people in this cove. It was a community hole, but I was catching them. I was catching them consistently. Now on day 2, unfortunately, it wasn't as strong, but let's watch some highlights of day 1, and I'll cut back in and kind of give you guys an idea on why I think this bait right here is so good. Gut on that thing. So you can see, like, I was really risking it on some of these casts. The rod I was using on this was the Megabass Orochi Whip Snake. I ultimately actually had to change to a different rod on day 2 because I blew that one out. And a long story on that. How do you blow out a spinning reel? But the Whip Snake is the best spinning rod I've ever owned. Now, some of the new ones I have, I will say, probably are better than it. But historically, I've caught so many fish on that rod. It's been such a key part of my arsenal. It's just, I can't say enough good things about the Orochi Whip Snake. It's a phenomenal rod. Even now, if you can get one of those for cheap, it's super versatile. But let's talk about the Okashira screwhead a little bit here, because this was a huge player for me. And going into this tournament, I did not have a good practice. I wasn't really catching them, but I did catch a couple on jerkbaits, which I will admit on day 2 I caught 4 out of my 5 keepers on jerkbaits, the other one being on this. But on day 1, all my fish, including the big fish of my tournament, came on this little tiny guy. And what I was seeing is those bait were real tiny and they were pushed behind these docks. They weren't quite like out in the open. All the bass were pushing the bait in there. There were spotted bass, largemouth bass, and I was just chucking this in there and just doing a slow wind. Because when you see this coming through the water, I mean, it's got this head here and it's also got the eyes here. I mean, it just kind of looks like a couple bait fish swimming together when this propeller is just spinning. And you can throw this on really light finesse line, and those fish had seen a lot of baits. There were a lot of people in that hole. And I can't say enough good things about this. This thing was just a key player for me because it was so easy to cast back into those pockets. You can make a real accurate cast, and you could be really quiet. I think that was an important thing. Those baits spooked really easily, and in turn, it would make the bass move if you spooked the bait. But with this, I could just chuck it behind those dock cables, and I pulled out some really nice fish with this. So this bait right here, got to be one of my MVPs of 2024. I've always really enjoyed throwing this bait, especially when the water is cooler, and it pretty much got me that top 25 finish in the Bassmaster Kayak Championship.
Oh, dang.
Yeah, there's a big girl. I was on the Okashira. They're both good.
You guys want to double up?
Yeah, that's why I was like,
Doubled up.
all right, let's let them go. Brown and green. So the weather's warming up. Let's move to April. I've got some rods sitting here too. We'll talk about rods and other gear. I'm not going to just bore you guys on just the baits, but this bait right here, let me tell you guys, this thing was quite literally a game changer. Even though this particular color is called Game Over, I feel like the game was just starting. And if you're not familiar with this, I have a whole video. You can see all this footage of me throwing this bad boy, but I'm going to explain it to you. This is the Asakana Slide 170. This is made by Raid. I actually own the rod that this is made for, which is the Raid diffuser. This is just under 2 ounces. It is a soft swim bait. You can see, you know, your typical soft glide bait swim bait. These are real popular now. The Flag 170, you know, Megabass has got a version of this now. I think they call it the Ayu Swimmer. So it's definitely a crowded category now, but what sets this one apart is this. This is the harness. You can see it's a 2-hook harness that just locks in there like this. So it goes in like this, You tie your line through there, and you've also got this stinger that you can just tuck back there in the back. This thing is just smallmouth candy. I caught so many big smallmouth. One of the best days I had on the river this year was in April, fishing behind two of my buddies with this, and I was just absolutely nailing them on this. Like, it was just like every wood, every rock piling I brought this by, smallmouth were crushing it. And this was in April, the water was still cool, you know, there's still real pre-spawn. For all practical purposes, you could even say it was like an early spring pattern, because we did have a pretty cool spring. I don't think most smallmouth even tried to spawn around here until May, because we did have a lot of rain. So this was like a real cool springtime bait. I took this with me everywhere. I caught a lot of fish on this year. So I'll show you guys a few clips on this. But I do want to point out, like, you can work this however you want. You can glide it, you can chop it. I like to just kind of chop it in place. It looks like a big dumb shiner, big dumb shad, big dumb sucker, which are really prevalent in my rivers. So we'll watch some of that footage, but honestly guys, like Okashira Slide 170, if you haven't gotten one of these, I highly recommend it. I still have the original one I bought. These things are super durable. I hammered it. That's a big one. Well boys, there we go.
On the Osakana?
Yeah, dude, I'm tearing it up on this Okashira. I had to get closer. So I'm going to cheat a little bit here with some crankbaits. So that's your typical craw-colored rock crawler. That's actually one of their new colors in the matte. And this right here is a Berkeley Fritside. No color in particular, but red just so it matches. These were players on the river all year for me. This one more so than this one, but early in the spring I caught a lot of big fish on this one, especially in like a shad pattern. I caught a lot of fish on this, just working through those rocks real slow back in late February. One of the best floats I did this year was in late February. Like, we had such an epic February, March, April this year on the river. I caught two fish back to back, a 19-inch largemouth and then a 19.5-inch smallmouth that was like, I think it was 3.75 pounds. Like, it was just a little fat chunky dude was on this flat side, and that was after I switched from the jerkbait. So, and I would argue, like, pretty much all fall on any of our trips, if you didn't have this bait right here tied on. And I don't know what it was about the rock crawler, it was specifically this one. And I know you could probably get away with a wiggle wart. Wiggle wart is a pretty well-known Ozark secret here, but I'm telling you guys, like, this one was just lights out. So let's watch a little bit of footage here. I'll show you guys that particular catch, and you can see that, you know, the crankbaits were a big player in 2024. Oh, dude, it's a big large. Oh, baby. Yep. This is a pretty big smallie.
What?
I said this is a pretty big smallie. This is definitely a big fish of the day. I feel like the crank is kind of heating up.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. But
3 1/4.
3 1/4? All right.
3 1/4.
18.5 and 3 1/4. That's the fish to beat for the day.
Okay, moving along here. I'm going to cheat a little bit here. Every single tournament that I fished this year, the new Z-Man Evo chatterbait was a player. Gunnersville caught a lot of big keepers on the Evo. Susquehanna caught a 20-inch smallmouth on the Evo. Lake Bistineau and Caddo, every single one of my keepers was on the chatterbait Evo. So needless to say, it was a big year for this particular bait. And I don't know what it is about the Evo. It is a little bit different than the jackhammer, but it's got very similar startup speed, which I know a lot of people are concerned about when you talk about this. But this thing also won me the River Series tournament I won this year. That video's up on the channel. I caught all my fish that day mostly on the chatterbait Evo. So this thing was a huge player for me. And when I was at Gunnersville, when this bite died, which we're going to talk about in a second here, this thing was just lights out good. So I ended up getting 40th out of 250 on Gunnersville, and like I said, like if it wasn't for the fact that I made the change to the Evo, probably wouldn't even gotten half of that, because that was a super competitive tournament. And I cannot talk about Gunnersville without talking about this bad boy. This is the Jackal Carrera. This is the same one I used. You can see how beat up it is. Eyeball's missing. That eyeball's still there. It doesn't float very well anymore. I caught probably 50 fish on this bad boy during practice and the tournament. On day one, I had my limit by 7 a.m. using nothing but this Jackal Carrera, and it was out fishing everyone around me 3-1. I was catching very quality fish. After day one, I was sitting in like the top 40 with like, I think I was just shy of 90 inches. This little bad boy is the most underrated frog, and honestly, like, a lot of people think bigger is better. I don't know what it is about this, but I catch absolute giants on this tiny little guy. And I really want to show you guys a couple of clips here, just so you see how aggressive they eat this bad boy. So let's play those, and then we're going to cut to back here, and I'm going to talk about a couple chatterbait clips. Tell me that's not a nice one. Look at that. Jackal Carrera. Alright, well there's 5 down this stretch. I think we found out where we're going to fish. So, another 17. So yeah, you can see it was a wet day out there. The frog bite was on. I had so much fun at Gunnersville. It was one of the most fun tournaments I did this year. Unfortunately, because of the low light conditions, 90% of those catches weren't on video. You just couldn't see them. It was just still too dark. So I don't know. I need to figure out how to film it dark. But the Evo, you know, you can see those last 2 clips on the Evo in front of docks. Like the frog bite just went, wasn't there anymore. Switched to the Evo, and boom, we started actually catching them again. And then on day 2, like I said, at Gunnersville, I caught all my fish on this. So these 2 baits right here were my, you know, early summer in through the late summer type stuff. Like I caught a lot of fish on these. So shout out to those. If you haven't tried the tungsten version of this, the tungsten version is slightly different. It's got a higher pitch sound, but I'm a huge fan of it. I'm going to talk about something that just came out this year that I think flies under the radar a little bit, and I've talked about it before, and you've probably seen me use it. I've made several short form content videos about this, but this right here, you can see, it looks like an old Ned rig. I guess you could say it is, but it's actually a Z-Man TRD fatties. So you might be familiar with the longer fatties, which are, you know, your typical 6-inch finesse worm, but this is the small version of it. So this is 3 inches. It's just slightly longer than a Ned rig, and it's got that bulbous tail. It's got that skinny middle, and then your typical, you know, there. And I threw this from the start of the year all the way till now. I'm still throwing this. In fact, the last trip I went out, I was popping this through the grass, catching bass as I would pull it through. This thing right here caught me my 3rd biggest smallmouth I've ever caught in weight, which is up in Wisconsin. And I think that clip's worth watching, so let's play it real quick. We're going to do the short and firm. You can see I kind of toss it over here into this wood, and I just let it sit. And I'm letting the current kind of just push this along the sand. And that smallmouth comes and picks it up, and man, she fights so hard. One of the hardest fighting fish I'd ever caught, because the water temps were just absolutely perfect. So TRD fatties caught me a lot of big fish, and I caught a lot of smallmouth on this at Susquehanna. I was using it as a follow-up bait. When they would miss the whopper plopper, as you can see there, I'd follow it up with this, and I'd catch a lot of them. So like, you know, this is kind of a good 1-2 punch on the river for me because what I liked about this is like a lot of people like Sinkos because you can follow it in, the Sinko will fall down. I like this because in the river, sometimes when I throw the Sinko in, it's instantly going like this. And if this fish is sitting here, when I threw the Sinko in, it would like float down here. And sure, they can see it and they might grab it. This, I could instantly grab it. And it's just going right down to the bottom. That fish typically would follow it down and boom. So like, this is a crazy 1-2 punch. Like I didn't have this on my bingo card, but this worked really well, especially at Susquehanna. I was catching a lot of fish on this, and the chatterbait. So we'll talk about this in just a second. Now, I do want to give an honorable mention to the Diesel Minnow. Also Texas rigged the same way. Several different colors. My favorite color was actually this one, which was Gold Rush. I don't know what it was. I just think it looks like a little goby or like a little like sculpin. Or even like a small just bait fish on the bottom, and I would Texas rig it on the same, you know, your owner blockhead like this and just bounce it through the bottom, drag it, swim it. One of the most versatile baits I threw this year. A lot of fish caught on that. So if you haven't tried that technique, it's the 3-inch one, Texas rigged weedless, the Ned head, and it is just a killer smallmouth bait. It catches largemouth too. I got some big largemouth on it as well. So. All right, so let's talk about swim baits and a couple swim baits that I use this year. Swim baits are kind of a bloated category right now. There's a lot of different ones, and I've got some laying around back here. I'm going to show you 2 that I caught a lot on this year. One has got to be the Tiny Clash. This is the Sake Bomber from Hookup Tackle. Tons of fish on this. I don't even know if I need to talk about this. I feel like if you've ever swim bait fished in your life, you've heard of the Tiny Clash. It's a super affordable swim bait. Super versatile. You can pop the lip out, you can turn into a glide bait, you can flip the tail up and down. There's even a V tail that you can put into this. Really, really versatile bait. Caught a lot of fish on this year. I didn't fish this much in tournaments, but you know, on the river, this was a killer bait. Had a lot of success on it last year as well. So this one's kind of a repeat winner. That's what I was saying. Some of these might be kind of obvious, but this right here is actually the Chum Glide. If you're familiar with that, he is a local swim bait maker. He makes a couple different ones. He actually makes a bigger version of this now. But one of the biggest smallmouth I caught on my river this year was on a unpainted version of this one. And I really want to show that clip because I've actually never shown it on the YouTube channel. So I'm going to play that and I'm going to talk about it a little bit. So what makes this bait really good, as you can see, I kind of just toss it into that current seam, is just how compact it is and how much you can just kind of give it that input, and it chops. And it swims really well in current. I think, like, you know, it might not be the world's best open water style swim bait, but when it comes to current, that's where this, you know, really shined. And that bass was tucked real tight up against that current seam. You could see like that current was pushing down that mud wall, and I made a really good cast in there with this and just kind of kept chopping it, and she just came out and smoked it. And honestly, the amount of fish I caught that day on this Chum Glide was insane, and they were all quality, but I did catch some small ones too. Like, if you're ever worried that you're only going to catch big ones, that's simply not the case. So, you know, I had a pretty good year throwing, you know, your typical swim baits, but I just wanted to point those 2 out because I do feel like those 2 swim baits were kind of standouts. Okay, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about rods, reels, and stuff like that. I actually didn't buy a lot of new rods and reels until the end of the year here on Black Friday. I actually have a video up on that, so go check that out. I've got a lot of new JDM stuff. I even talk a little bit more in depth about the Okashira slide and just a couple more, you know, JDM products that I picked up. But I've had this rod right here for 3 seasons now. This is the IMX Pro G Loomis IMX Pro bladed jig rod. This is my go-to chatterbait rod, and I know there's a lot of options, you know, but this is an American-made rod. It looks cool. It's got that, like, you know, dark, deep red. I really like that about that. But I've caught a lot of fish on this year. All my fish at Bistineau was on this rod. All my chatterbait fish on the Susquehanna was on this rod. A lot of the fish I caught, all the fish I caught at Gunnersville in the grass was on this rod. I cannot tell you how happy I am with this after searching so long for a rod that I really truly felt like threw the chatterbait well. I've tried Dobbins, I've tried Shimano, I've even tried a couple Megabass options, and they're all really good options. I just think this one worked really well for me. And I really fell in love with this rod this year. Even though I've owned it for a while, I feel like it was a workhorse for me this year, so I just wanted to kind of give a shout out on that. Okay, let's talk about a rod that I thought did really well. This is the Daiwa BLX, and I've actually owned this rod for quite a while. In some of my content the last couple of years, you may have seen it pop up, but it wasn't until the end of last year and really this year that this rod really just spoke to me. This is a $400 rod. It is a premium rod, but it's one that you don't really hear much about. I got this one on sale and I decided to buy it on a whim because when you see a $400 rod for like a steel, you start to wonder like, well, was it really worth $400? And at first I didn't really like it. This is a 6.8 and I think they technically call it a medium light, but reality is it's just your typical medium. So it's a 6.8 medium. It is a shorter rod. It's got a really fast tip, super light, but it's super sensitive. I mean, this is a premium rod from Daiwa. And I gotta tell you guys, like, this checks all the boxes for me. I thought about selling this. Before I gave it a second chance, I thought about selling this. I initially pulled it out thinking like, oh yeah, this will be a good forward-facing sonar rod. And then I started taking it with me on the river just because it was shorter. It was easier just to throw in the kayak. And I started throwing finesse on it. And then I was like, well, I really like this. It's really sensitive. And then I found myself taking it on all my trips. Suddenly I'm taking this to Wisconsin to catch big smallmouth. This was the only reel I bought this year technically until later in the year. So this is the only reel I've had all season. This is actually the old Daiwa Tatua reel. This is 2500. I've got it spooled with 10-pound Power Pro. This is the V2, the Super Slick and the blue. I really like this one. I'll be honest, I don't think you necessarily need a colored braid. I find this blue one to be a good one though because it just kind of blends in with the sky. But yeah, the Tatua plus BLX, I mean, this has got to be my MVP on the spinning side this year, which is crazy considering I love my X-Pride medium heavy, or I love my X-Pride 7-foot medium. I love my Windbuster with the X-Lens, but something about this package just really spoke to me this year. So anyways, those of you who made it to the end of the video, I'm going to be giving away 2 different lures in this video. I'm going to be giving away 1 Asakana slide and 1 Vision 110. I'll pick the color, I'll pick something good. I've got a ton of Respect Series colors. I'll probably pick a more color though that you could actually fish and not feel guilty about it. But just leave a comment down below what your most productive bait was, and I'll get these shipped out to you. So my two most productive baits this year were a jerkbait and the Asakana slide. This one being the upset, that one being kind of like an old standard. So leave a comment what your most productive bait is, and I will pick a random winner come, let's just say we'll give it a week from this video going live. So, you know, as long as you're subscribed to the channel, I'll be able to message you and we'll figure shipping out. It shouldn't be a big deal. But that's my 2024 much different style video. I know it's gross. We are going to go fishing tomorrow, so plenty of content still to come throughout the winter. I just thought this would be a good introspective to kind of talk about some of these baits that I think played a big role in me and my fishing journey this year, and just some of the upsets. So I'm really excited for 2025, guys. Like, I've got so many places planned. I've already got 7 trips in 7 different states planned. So we're going to be doing some pretty epic stuff, and I will just see you guys on the water.